Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jin Young-jin. I'm the director of Charles B. Wang Center, and I'm also the organizer of tonight's program. And thank you so much for joining us for this poetry reading by Aaron Caycedo-Kimura. We're honored to host this reading in celebration of Aaron's new book, Common Grace. The book, which is published by Beacon Press last month, and it is available now on Amazon, so please check it out. Before I pass the floor to Aaron, let me briefly introduce the Wang Center's fall programs. Even though our meeting tonight are over Zoom, you all are welcome to visit the Wang Center in person. We are open to public 7 days a week. Currently, our exhibition Sauli Dusambina, Kazakh Funny Games and New Mythologies is on view through December 10th. So be sure to visit and take in the witty and multi-layered art of incisive contemporary Kazakh artists. We will also be holding our Long Island South Asian Film Festival on Saturday, November 19th. We will feature 14 short films and 1 feature-length film. And it will certainly be a fun day to watch some interesting newly released films and join the reception afterwards. Lastly, a shadow puppet show with a live music will be on Saturday, December 3rd. There are 2 shows at 1 o'clock and 3:30 p.m. Also, I do hope that you will join us at one or more of these events. So back to tonight's program. Tonight's program was made possible by Professor Carmen Bugan from English Department at Stony Brook University. She couldn't be here tonight due to a family emergency, but I'd like to thank her for introducing tonight's speaker to the Wang Center. So let me briefly introduce Aaron Caycedo-Kimura. He's an author of Ubasute, which won the 2020 Slapering Hall Press Chapbook competition. His honors include a Robert Pinsky Global Fellowship in Poetry, a St. Botolph Club Foundation Emerging Artist Award in Literature, and nominations for the Pushcart Prize, Best of the Net, and the Best New Poets anthologies. Not only Aaron is a writer, he's also a gifted visual artist. His paintings has been exhibited in the galleries throughout Connecticut, including the Westport Arts Center and City Lights Gallery in Bridgeport. So without further ado, let me now invite the poet Aaron Caycedo-Kimura. Please mute your mic and type any questions on the chat box for Q&A session that follow the reading. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Jin, and thank you, Eric, for hosting me tonight. And thank you, Dr. Carmen Bugan, for having me come read. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored to be sharing some poems with you tonight from my new collection. It's Common Grace, as Dr. Jin mentioned, and it's a full-length poetry collection, my first. It's divided into 3 sections, so I'm going to be reading several poems from each section for you. I'm gonna read 18 poems altogether. That might sound like a lot, but really my poems tend to be short to medium in length. I don't have any long poems to read for you tonight. I think I like the short to medium format because I like the challenge of trying to say as much as I can in a short amount of space. So I'm going to just go through the sections in order. And the first poem I'm going to read from you is the first poem in the book. And this will give you a little insight into my family background. And this is called Family Anthem. I walk into the garage from side door sunlight, ELO on my Walkman. My eyes dissolve the darkness, discover my parents locked in a slow dance embrace, whispering to each other like lovers. But my parents aren't lovers. They're Japanese. Never kiss, hold hands, say, I love you. not even to me. Once I asked Mom if she loved me. She replied, "My mother and father never said it, but I knew they did." My parents hear my shuffle, separate like guilty teenagers. She escapes into the house, he into the Ford, opens the garage door. I fumble, forget what I was looking for, but all afternoon replay that dissonant chord. I'm going to read more about my parents in a little bit, but the next poems I'm going to read are about my art life. I'm also a painter, as Dr. Jin mentioned, and although these poems are about my painting life, they could be read as Ars Poetica, poems about writing poems, because they're very apropos to my poetry life as well. And this next poem is entitled On Plein Air at Silver Sands State Park. On plein air is a term that just means you take your portable easel out into the open air and you paint the landscape in front of you. On plein air at Silver Sands State Park. I block in the lights and darks of a cottonwood grove that looks like a moldy muffin floating on my canvas. The flies and wetland whiff of rotten egg will keep me from staying much longer. As I use the last dab of sap green on my palette, a woman walking a black lab stops to look. She tilts her head, nods. "Do you remember Bob Ross?" She loved his happy trees, how he made them so easy with the edge of his brush. She yanks her dog from sniffing my easel's leg. "Come on, boy," leaves me to my landscape. I end up staying all morning, struggling with my trees, trying to make art with each labored stroke. I don't go painting on plein air anymore because it's a guarantee that if you go and take your easel out, someone is going to stop to you and talk to you about Bob Ross. Don't get me wrong, I love Bob Ross, but I'm such a huge introvert that I'd rather be just left alone to my painting. So I stay in the studio, and this is the title of the next poem, In the Studio. Arranged on a table behind my easel, a red sake bottle, blue glass face, an ochre bowl I bought for $1 at Goodwill. Joni Mitchell plays on my laptop. I slosh a number 5 flat brush in the wash container's cloudy chirp. Let it soak in the strainer. Step away from the canvas 5 or 6 feet. Bowl's too flat. Some lighter touches in front will round it out. The background's kind of warm. A few strokes of blue-gray should cool it down, push it back. Joni sings California. After flying back to Santa Rosa when my father died, I returned home, met Tinaka for coffee. She'd show my work if I didn't drip and spatter. For a while, I painted to please her, then canceled my show, let my brushes harden, my palette crust. Back at the easel, I grab a tube of ultramarine, squeeze a dab on my palette, slather in some vermilion, ochre, titanium white. Joni takes me back to junior high. I lose myself in study hall, scribbling and sketching all over the book covers I made from brown paper bags. My next poem is a sonnet that I wrote for an acquaintance of mine, another visual artist. While I was up in Boston doing my MFA in creative writing, she was doing her MFA in visual art. And there was a project, an annual project called the Writer Artist Book Project, and where writers and artists are paired together to create a book. And I was paired with this person, and she was a landscape artist. So for our book, what she did was she took this long piece of cardstock and painted a landscape all across it, cut off the top, and then wrote the poem that I'm about to read for you on the bottom. And then she accordion folded it. So you could set it on a table, and she wrote on the back and on the front, painted on the back and front, so you could walk around the table and read the poem while enjoying this three-dimensional book. She took me to her studio, showed me her work, talked about her work. She also talked about her life. And so I took all that information and I put it into this sonnet that I wrote for our project. After writing this, it's about her life, but I realized that it's very apropos to so many creatives who, and that could be writers, artists, maybe dancers, singer-songwriters, who desire to pursue an unconventional creative life. And this poem is entitled North on Route 101 for AH. She drives up the winding coast 20 miles per hour in Pacific fog, like she's searching for a line, a la prima, with the worn bristles of a flat brush. In every twist, she focuses on the road, not the drop-offs. The fog dissipates, swatches of wild rye, reed grass, and sky spread across the windshield. Back on the other coast, dishes, pots, pans, a job, most of her clothes. Tonight, she'll sleep near the foot of Mount St. Helens, wake up to a sun eruption of Hansa yellow and cadmium orange. She'll sketch a stream tumbling toward her over a fallen cedar, a sprinkling of pastel dust in her lap. This is a very short poem. It's a fall poem, an autumn poem entitled Sunflowers. I love sunflowers. Last to arrive, they tower 8 feet in the garden, like reapers come to survey their work. They bow their monocular heads, giving thanks for today's rain. As the air crisps and the sun zippers across the sky, they lead us into harvest, goldfinches pecking out their eyes. I'm going to move, that's kind of a brutal poem, but I think that's a good segue into the second section. The second section of the book is about my parents, and it's entitled Ubasute. And Ubasute is a Japanese word which literally means abandoned. And it refers to a Japanese practice from, a mythical practice from folklore, where a grown son would take his aged mother and put her on his back, carry her to a mountain, and leave her there, abandon her, leave her there to die. I was a little boy when my mother told me this horrible tale. I don't know why you would tell your child this, but that's the subject matter of the next poem I'm going to read for you. It's an ekphrastic poem. It's inspired by a woodblock print by the master Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. And the title of the woodblock print and the title of my poem is The Moon of Ubasute. The Moon of Ubasute, After the Woodblock by Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. Years from now, when I am old, blind, and crippled, his mother said, you must carry me up the slope of Tanigawa, past the ancient knotted pine, leave me in a cradle of hakone grass and moss. Without pity, my son, the moon will watch as I reach for my mother. Okasan, Okasan. The ginkgos will bow, weep their leaves, bury me in gold. My next poem is a Malaysian pantoum, and this is entitled Burial. I return my father's body to the earth, cremated as he instructed in a letter. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. Those who needed to know were told. I had his remains cremated as he instructed, scattered his ashes in Bodega Bay. Those who needed to know were told that I waited until my mother passed to scatter his ashes in Bodega Bay, past the jetty where we used to fish. I waited until my mother passed, poured out their dust together, past the jetty where we used to fish, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. I poured out their dust together with a handful of Uncle George, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. With a handful of Uncle George, I returned their bodies to the earth. My next poem is about my parents when they first got married, when they were newlyweds, before my sister and I came along. And this poem is entitled The Hardest Part. The fire truck siren downstairs raided the air of my mother's dreams. She'd scream in her sleep, my father told me, even after we married. More than a decade past the Second World War, for him, American concentration camps, for her, the firebombing of Tokyo. They moved into a San Francisco apartment that rented to Japs, a one-bedroom walk-up above the Post Street fire station. They painted their bathroom black. It was in style then. Shelved books, unboxed a new rice cooker, watered a shrub of Japanese maple, potted for their future garden. When the station got a call in the middle of the night, the rumble of the overhead door crumbled into the wreck that was once her home. Swirling lights flashed ancient trees into flames through the thin silk curtains of her eyelids. No warning, no drill, no cover. My father stilled her body, his broad hand on her shoulder or hip, as they lay in the dark, listening to the slowing of her breath. The hardest part of those nights, he said, was waiting, sometimes hours, for the truck and the men to come back. The very last word of my next poem is the word two, and that's the number two, TWO. And the title is When You're the Sun, and that's SON, sun. When you're the sun, it doesn't matter if you're the youngest. Call the hospice nurse to the house to pronounce your father dead. Close the bedroom door. Give your mother the privacy she needs to tell him he left too soon. When the nurse phones the funeral home, ask your sister to take your mother to his garden to grieve with the ginkgo, pine, and pin oak. Don't let her see the dark-suited men, the gurney, the body bag. Try not to feel bad that your father's wearing only a diaper. As he's wheeled out his front door, loaded into the back of a hearse, don't think about the neighbors watching. Keep moving. Break down the hospital bed, the one delivered this morning, so your mother won't have to smell it. Finally, forgive yourself for lifting him into that bed, crushing his lungs, ending him an hour sooner, maybe two. What's kept alive? She crunches her walker into the sea of pebbles surrounding the stepping stones, tells me, this bush with flowers is Japanese. That one is too, but different. I hover close behind, ready with an outstretched arm, as if to give a blessing. Pick that large weed near the lantern, by the roots, and throw it into the pail. My father planned and planted this garden 50 years ago, hidden behind the fence of their Santa Rosa tract home. But he's gone now. She hires a hand to rake leaves, prune branches once a month. Soon she'll be gone. I'll sell the house, return to Connecticut. A stranger will buy it, become caretaker of the garden, but won't know that from their San Francisco apartment, my father transported the Japanese maple, cradled in a small clay pot, the momiji now guarding the north corner, and that my mother chided him for bothering with a dying shrub. This next poem is about my father, and it's entitled Memorial. Straight as steel, hands on hips, Dad balances like a hood ornament on Irving Wasserman's head. Irv stands feet shoulder width apart, arms stretched out wide. A towel turban cushions his scalp. On the San Francisco Marina Green, sunbathers pay no attention to the two college gymnasts in tight swim trunks. The black and white image is attached to an email Irv sent this morning, He says he lost contact after my parents married 60 years ago, would like to reconnect. He doesn't know he's 7 years too late. No online obit, found me through my website. He calls my father remarkable, a word I never heard used to describe him. But yes, look, there he is, poised in the air, the husband who never cheated, the father who never struck me. You know, my mother was actually born in the United States. She was born in Bayonne, New Jersey. And then before the war, my grandfather took the family back to Japan. And so she was there for the war. And then after World War II, she returned to the United States, to New York City, went to nursing school, then went back to Japan and worked at the Tokyo U.S. Army Hospital for a few years. And then she came back to the United States, this time to the West Coast, where she stayed for the rest of her life. This is a poem, a prose poem about my mother, and it's called Tokyo Army Hospital, 1957. She looks over her left shoulder, body slightly twisted toward the shutterbug interrupting her conversation with the doctor. Nurse Hoshino, give us a smile. All in white, long-sleeved, high-collared uniform. Nurse's cap, like an inverted Dixie cup with a lacy brim. In a year, she'll return to the States, meet a guy named Joe on a tennis date, get married in 2, become a mother in 3, have me in 6. 60 years later, I'll find the photo in my basement, in a box, rummaging through her stuff I can't throw away. I'll post it on the internet. Happy Mother's Day. She's 29, half my age. I want to go back in time, tell her something wise, or at least helpful. But having lived through a world war, she already knows more than I do. My father died in 2011, and my mother passed away in 2015. And back in 2015, I had the privilege of being with both my parents when they passed away. And in 2015, my wife, Louisa, who's also a poet, moved back to California for 7 months and took care of my mother. And this next poem is a little bit about that. And this is called Afternoon Infusion. She panics 3 hellos as if startled by the noise of an empty house. Calls from St. Joseph's. The nurses are slow to start her hydration. I'm at a bar. Stevie Nicks reverbs in my beer, lures me back to the edge of 17 in this town I left 30 years ago. I take her call outside, stand away from the smokers. Half truth, I'm at the mall. She slurs a request. Milk of magnesia. And that other thing she can't remember. But I remember when I was a boy. She told me about the mythical Japanese custom, Ubasute. A grown son lifts his aged mother on his back, delivers her to a mountain, leaves her to die. I'll come pick you up after chemo, I say, and hang up, realizing she's already cradled by the mountain. The waft of cigarette smoke and hint of manure in Santa Rosa air usher me back into the restaurant. The hostess smiles, welcomes me. Clueless, I have come and gone. How are we all doing? Okay. I have 5 more poems that I'd like to share with you, and I'm going to turn to the last section of the book. And this section is about my wife, Louisa, and it's about our relationship, and it's about the life we've built together so far. This next poem is about her. Being a poet, a fellow poet, we're each other's first readers. So she reads all my poems, I read hers. It was really funny. I did a reading where one of the Q&A questions was, 1, do you guys read each other's work? 2, who takes criticism better? That was probably the best question that I've ever had. But since my wife is not doing the reading with me, please, nobody ask the question. But all that to say, this poem, all the poems that I write about my wife and get put into print and online and that I read in public are all approved by her. 5 minutes on high. Louisa stabs the taut cellophane on a tray of frozen palak paneer. Pop, 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 10 to 12 times with a bony knife, even though the package says 2 to 3. I think of Psycho, the screeching violins, and Louisa as Norman Bates in Maternal Drag. Everyone's haunted by something. She puts our dinner in the microwave, punches in 5 minutes on high. Over the oven's drone, she tells me a man grabbed her in the stairwell of her apartment building when she was 7, clamped his hand over her face. Unable to breathe, she bit his finger, blood salting her lips before her mother heard her scream and came out the door. The man ran, but was caught weeks later with another girl, a scalpel in his pocket. Neighborhood dads tried throwing him off a roof before the cops came. 05, 04, 03. Louisa removes the tray before the microwave beeps. She rips back the perforated film, releases the steamy aroma of spinach, turmeric, garam masala. She can't watch Indiana Jones drown in my video game or look at those faceless willow tree figurines in Hallmark stores. She doesn't even like when frozen food can't breathe. Louisa and I met in New York City, and we met in 1997 and got married in 1998. And then after 9/11, we moved out of the city. We both had family members here in Connecticut. My sister is no longer here. She moved back to California. But the first place where we moved to was Norwalk, a city called Norwalk. So this is a Norwalk poem. And this is entitled Migration. Our neighbor Trey leans back on his black Audi coupe, sweet talks this week's girl outside our bedroom window. I try not to wake the curtains, reverse peeping through a narrow slit. My building, a 2-story row of apartments, faces another in the complex, forming a driveway, blacktop leading to the dumpsters. I gave you everything, she says, half crying. arms crossed at her chest. You love that thing more than me. His pumped arm holds her close, hand low at her waist. In the other, a silver-plated handgun. Now it's my turn to give you everything, he says. Trey moved in next door with another guy a few weeks ago, strapped an orange teddy bear, big as a kid, to their balcony grating. Luis and I think they're selling drugs. Go to the police station, report our suspicion. There's nothing we can do without evidence, the officer says. We moved here a year ago from New York City after 9/11, down the block from the hospital. Thought we'd have a baby, start a family like Barb and Dave upstairs. Whenever Trey leaves the building, he slams the door. Damn it, my kid just went down for a nap, Barb screams out the window. Trey heads for his car. Yeah. For now, I move our bed to the living room, the other side of the apartment, away from stray bullet insomnia. From there, you can see St. Mary's steeple, Norwalk River, and the highway. One summer, Luis and I live in a small town called Bloomfield, which is right north of Hartford, Connecticut. And one summer, I was transplanting hay-scented ferns from my backyard to the front yard. And I thought to myself, this would be a really nice project to do with a child. And I wrote this poem. This poem is entitled The Fern. A green glowing feather fell from the sky, planted itself quill down, sprouted a body, more feathers, nested in cool earth. Worms at its beak laid eggs, hatched its young, not a flock, but a luminous glen. As we walk, we feel their underground song. You believe my tale because I'm your father, and you, with the hand I hold, were never conceived. I have two more poems I'd like to share with you. And this next poem I wrote, I was wondering, what would it be like if I knew that today was the last day I would be alive, if I knew that today was the last day I would be alive on this earth. And this is what I wrote. And it's not really about death or dying, it's more about contentment. And this poem is entitled, If This Were the Day. If this were the day, I'd still shower, shave, eat breakfast for the pleasure. A toasted bagel, a schmear, lox, red onions, capers, definitely capers, an iced mocha. I'd skip the stretching, crunches, push-ups, go right to the garden, check the milkweed for monarchs, the yarrow planted yesterday. Back in the house, straighten out my studio, just a little. Open my laptop, start a poem, a few lines for drama. After emailing you my passwords, go lie on the sofa, text you a heart, rest the phone on my chest. I'd listen to you stop singing slightly out of tune in the kitchen. Wait for the vibration of your answer, drift. Before I read my last poem, thank you everyone so much for coming tonight. And thank you, Dr. Jin and Eric, for having me. Thank you, Dr. Bugan, for inviting me. This last poem is entitled Gutter Trees. Louisa and I raised the ladder, walking it up rung by rung, prop it against the second story. After a breath, balance it back, heave the extension by hand, 4 hands to be exact. Rung locks click into place with each push. The rope and pulley don't work. In seasons of dirt and leaves mulched into the gutter, pigweeds have grown, or maybe hickory seedlings, standing a foot or so above the roof's edge. Before moving here, we were blown across 2 countries, 3 states, 6 cities, dug in wherever we landed. If it weren't for the neighbors, we'd let our gutter trees linger, our hanging garden of Bloomfield, 9th wonder of the world. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. I don't think anyone wrote any questions. I think we can just casually talk. I mean, we're just 12 of us. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to speak directly to Aaron.
I just want to say,
Paula? Yeah. Oh, who's that? Oh, Iris? Yeah, go
I
ahead
just want to
first.
say thank you. And it was a lovely reading, and I'm really glad I had the opportunity to hear it.
Thank you, Iris. I think I mentioned that Iris also lives in Bloomfield.
Mm-hmm. And we hope for many more collections.
I hope so too. Thank you, Iris.
You're still young. It took me a whole lot longer to get my first collections.
It takes a while, but it's never too late.
Mhm.
Hi, Carla, you have a question?
Well, I'm really struck by the freshness of the visual imagery here. And particularly like I thought the painting of the bathroom black. I mean, there's just some very startling visual imagery. And I think a thing that painting and poetry share is avoiding cliche. How you avoid, there's just so many ways one can describe the white bird, the sunset. And I wonder if you could just talk for a minute or so about that issue, since you're both a painter and a poet, how you think about avoiding cliches, especially visual cliches.
I think as a painter, I mean, as a poet, it's easier for me to spot the cliche because I actually purposely go through it word by word and say, okay, is that too common? And sometimes I will purposely put a common image for a specific purpose, something identifiable. But yeah, the problem is to, try to describe something in a way that you don't think you've ever read before. I think I'm a little more lenient with my painting because
really?
I'm not so concerned about, I'm very concerned about design and composition, but I'm not so concerned about the object or what I'm painting, but rather how I'm painting it. And I think in that way, the painting ends up not being a cliche, hopefully. Thank you for that question.
Is that the book cover is work by you or?
No, it's not. It's by Beacon's designer, Carol Cho. They asked me what I wanted the book cover to look like, and I decided I wanted something abstract. And so I filled out a form where I described all, what kind of feeling I wanted the cover to have, what I wanted it to look like. And Carol came up with like 3 different covers, and I picked one and I said, okay, now can you do this? I came there as a poet, not as an artist. So I try not to be so diva-like and, saying you got to make it like this, but she's good. She was great. And I love the cover because it sort of has that, if you look at it closely, it has kind of a handmade paper feel, kind of like Japanese handmade paper visually. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, wonderful reading.
Hey.
Hey, wonderful reading as always. Through this process, have you found yourself reading, discovering other writers, particularly when you wrote poems like Ubasute? I'm not saying it right, but I'm just curious. You found yourself drawn to a writer or two through your own work?
I don't know, this is my friend Srini. He lives very close by, not in Bloomfield, but very close by, an amazing poet. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if I've discovered people through my own work. Well, okay, let me correct myself. I did discover Lawson Fusao Inada, who is a Japanese American poet. I did discover him while I was writing these poems about my parents, because I was looking, I realized I didn't know any Japanese American or Asian, very many Japanese American poets. And so I set out to find them, and I discovered that he wrote a lot about the camps, about the internment camps. So I guess, yeah, in answer to your question, I found one person out at least. Thank you, Srini. Jana?
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I don't know how to lower my hand, but thank you for the reading. I really liked all of them. And I just have multiple questions that I was just sort of collecting. So did you even have a inkling to want to take the maple and take it with you? Your dad's maple tree?
Okay, so what happened was over the years, he ended up having multiple maple trees. So I wasn't sure which one was the original one. Yeah, but I did take seeds from one of them, and I still have them. I haven't planted them, but I did put some seeds in the envelope.
Oh, that's sweet. So, and then was your mom around when you wrote the poem about her nursing in Japan and about the photo, or was that after?
That was after, way after.
Oh,
that poem is actually a recent poem I wrote maybe a year and a half ago, a couple years ago. My mom passed away in 2015. I think only one poem in the collection that I was ever able to read to my mother, and it's a poem that I didn't read tonight. But yeah, my parents really, I don't think, no, my mom knew I was writing, but my father never knew.
Oh, so did they don't know you as a poet?
No.
They just
No, it's kind of sad because poetry is so important to me in my life. It's something that I would have wanted to share with them, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then just my final thing is the first couple of poems I really enjoyed, and I want to say that I love the drips and the splatters on your paintings. I think that's like one of the best parts of it, is just that wabi-sabi of the whole thing. It's not perfect, and you let those accidents happen. But I love the light that you create in your paintings.
Thank you.
Some of them, it must be the light over on that side of the country or something, because it feels kind of Edward Hopper-esque in some of your paintings.
Well, I love Hopper.
Yeah. And then, but the question was around on the second poem, you talked about struggle to paint or struggle to put down a stroke. I can't remember what your words were.
I think the line was with each labored stroke.
Yeah,
Oh,
labored stroke.
Good memory.
Why?
Well, I wrote it down.
See, it affected you too. It's like,
Oh, it did affect me, and I thought I do centos. I take lines from poets, and I thought I want to use that.
Nice. Yeah, you have to share that poem with me if you use that.
Well, I was wondering how was it a struggle? Is painting a struggle? I thought painting sort of flows. Is that not? I don't paint, so I don't know.
Everything for me is a struggle. It's work. It's hard work. It's a joy. It's a joy, but I find the joy in the hard work. And I think that applies to poetry as well. Laying down each word, each line. It's a labor. It's not easy. I kind of think of painting and poetry kind of like sculpting. It's not. I don't think of painting necessarily for me the way I do it as painting. It's more like sculpting. Fashioning, painting, and writing too is like that.
I can really hear the carefulness and the. I haven't seen your art, your painting, but I wrote down quite a number of lines because the carefulness of the lines really struck me. And you might be the only man who's ever compared his wife to Norman Bates. That's just such an original line that I would have bought the book just on that line. I'm like, this man has no one. I've never read that. It's completely original, really amazing.
Well, I really liked how it all tied together in the end, because I was like, wow, that's really from your microwave oven to this incident. And then, I did enjoy that poem very much.
So that's my wife. Louisa, you could wave that's my wife.
Oh, really?
In that square, yeah.
Oh, hello.
Hi. Oh, you guys have the same last name. I didn't notice it before.
Yep. Any other questions? Thank you for these wonderful questions. And thank you for staying and chatting. Marie.
Question: how long does it take you to write your poems? And I'd also like to comment that I love them all. They're so, and I love the name of the book, Common Ground, because as you're reading the poem, it's like, oh my gosh, he's hitting those feelings that I feel. So it's wonderful. But yeah, I was wondering how long it takes you. Do they just come to you and it's one shot, or is it something you work on?
First of all, thank you for identifying. I'm glad you could identify with the paintings. I mean, the poems. Paintings and poems are very, are similar to me. It depends. Some poems write themselves, just like some paintings just paint themselves. Others, years. I have poems ideas that they came up with years ago, and then I'll pull them out and finish them. Sometimes I won't finish them, but yeah, it really depends the amount of time.
Do you ever do any workshops where you teach people how to write poems about their life?
I will. I haven't done any workshops this far. I've been too focused on getting this book out, and writing this book. But that's something that I will enjoy doing. So if anyone is on social media, please look for me and we could connect there. Facebook, Instagram. My Twitter right now is iffy. I don't know whether I'm going to leave or not. But I love Instagram. It's a very visual platform. And you could keep in touch with my goings on through that.
Thank you so much, all. Personally, I was fascinated by your personal story. It's all connected to history. So it was kind of a well embroidered kind of a, fabric, beautiful fabric. I felt like that, the way you compose your poetry. felt like a really well conducted embroidery to me.
That's nice.
So do you want to do the last remark to wrap it up? Or we can linger around a little longer, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I think thank you everyone for coming at 7:02. I just want to give a shout out to my friend Rachel White. She's probably coming in from the farthest distance. She lives in Australia.
Wow.
Thank you, Rachel, for tuning in. Thank you, everyone. It was nice to meet everyone, and I hope we can connect on social media. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, been an honor, and thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Jin Young and Eric, for having me.
Yeah,
So hope
thank
to
you.
see you guys again through, another literary programs or another Aaron's program. So thank you all so much for joining tonight.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good
Thank
night.
you for reading. Good night.